Yo guys, namaskaram. So I was actually reading something and I wanted to share one thing with you and probably I think some insights that we can have. So this is the one. This is called the Abilene paradox. So I'll also link it, but you can just search it basically on Google and things like that. Okay, so this was kind of coined by Jerry B. Harvey in his 1974 article called The Abilene Paradox, the Management of Agreement, wherein he starts this with the story that on a hot afternoon visiting in Texas, the family is comfortably playing dominoes on a porch until the father-in-law suggests that they take a 50-mile, that is 80-kilometer trip to Abilene for dinner. The wife says sounds like a great idea. The husband, despite having reservations because the drive is long and hot, thinks that his preferences must be out of step with the group and says, sounds good to me. I'm just hoping a mother wants to go. The mother in law then says, of course, I want to go. I haven't been to Abilene in a long time. The drive is hot, dusty, and long. When they arrive at the cafeteria, the food is as bad as the drive. They arrive back home 4 hours later, exhausted. One of them dishonestly says it was a great trip, wasn't it? The mother in law says that actually she would rather have stayed home but went along since the other three were so enthusiastic. The husband says, I wasn't delighted to be doing what we were doing. I only went to satisfy the rest of you. The wife says, I just went along to keep you happy. I would have had to be crazy to want to go out in the heat like that. The father in law then says that he only suggested it because he thought the others might be bored. So the group sits back perplexed that they together decided to take a trip that none of them wanted. This is important. They each would have preferred to sit comfortably but did not admit to it when they still had the time to enjoy the afternoon. So, what are like the major learnings? Mutual agreement in effective communication, vocalization of the group sentiment, probably reflections why we are doing this and things like that, and defeat the group leader to poor decision making. So, okay, I think that's a good insight. Now, why am I sharing this with you? So, basically, let's say whatever we think is right or wrong in a given context, these things usually keep on changing. You see, human mortality is not fixed. It evolves with the pertaining time, the culture, the type of power, and the type of consciousness that each person has. What one generation collectively calls as righteous, another calls barbaric. The moral compass is often guided by the collective consciousness, and maybe you can say collective convenience, not truth, which maintains, like, which breaks the ego. We prefer this collective convenience because our ego or the ego of the group kind of demands that. So I think one very important thing is whenever you see that there are certain decisions that you do not want to do and still are doing because of the group, it's probably time to question that. Now, coming from some very very good examples in our Indian context. So what earlier was considered very pristine and divine is now considered barbaric and cruel. One is the sati practice, wherein, like, it was once termed as this supreme devotional thing of, and I add the word quotes, pati parmeshwar. So they kind of used to go in the fire with the husband. Women who refused were shamed. Those who agreed were worshipped. Today, it's kind of viewed as a patriarchal violence, not sacrifice. What's a reflection that we can hold from this? That when the oppressed glorify their suffering, society calls it virtue, but in reality, they are just suffering. Another practice is slavery. Ancient Rome, Americans to some extent, and maybe some Islamic empires all considered it normal. Slave owners saw themselves as these protectors of the inferior race. Now, humanity considered it as a fundamental, disregard to the human right. They consider it as a moral. It's an ethical issue. What's one learning that we can take? That power, usually the common power, defines morality until you become aware of it or you start questioning the whole absurdity of it. Another thing which is very predominant in India is this whole untouchability slash caste system, once upheld as this divine hierarchy because of misinterpretation of a religious text, purity and pollution, like, the justified discrimination. Now it's legally and morally condemned, but still in society you see some of its residue kind of persist. So every system from this that is built on separation wherein there's this other class and we are this other class, calls itself sacred, but in reality it's just not treating humans as humans with the equal rights. Another common example can be this practice of witch hunting in Europe. Thousands of women burnt alive in the name of religion, fear disguised as faith, and their ignorance is presented as virtue during that time. But now we see that how inhumane it is. So every, I think it's a human thing that every era kind of kills what it does not understand. There could be a lot more other examples: child marriage and dowry, which was once considered normal as protecting family honor, lineage, and whatnot, where women were treated as property, men as buyers. But in reality, you now see how barbaric it was. I think in some parts of the country, there's also this thing of sacrificing animals, offering to gods as proof of devotion. Now it's perceived as ignorance and cruelty, and there are like proper laws protecting animals. Though I don't know to what level people fear those laws, because this is just outright losing the touch that one person has with their consciousness, replacing compassion with cruelty. A lot of things, I don't know, maybe industrial exploitation, smoking, which was seen as cool, marketed this whole cool thing. Now we see the harmful effects of it. So you see that sometimes all the common things which are presented to us, quote unquote, in our society is often barbaric when you kind of look at it from an awareness perspective. So what does that tells us? That always base yourself on facts, have the courage to question certain things, and if it does not make sense, stop participating in those things. Whether it makes you an outcast, makes you different from the group, doesn't matter. Because see, cruelty, like in these examples, cruelty is guised under this collective cultural thing, but in reality it's just cruelty, it doesn't hide the fact. I think these are just certain things that I just wanted to bring it up because I found it very interesting. Now, what does it look for a common man right now? I think maybe seeking validation from other people in the name of love. For some, it could mean comparing oneself to others, thinking that it's success. One has so many cars, one has so many this and that, without knowing that is it really something that my life wants. Some just consider pleasure, short-term pleasures, one night stands, at the cost of ruining their long-term marriages, long-term relationships. And then you later realize that attention, seeking all this validation is not genuine respect. You just lose your self-respect. If some people are just buying things on EMIs and things like that, it's just speed, but there's a long-term slavery to it, and it's not genuine growth. Your desire, your short-term hedonic, you can say, desires to fulfill your one-night stands. This is not genuine love. So, what feels like a reward right now due to group situations and individual situations is usually not the case. Those are usually traps. So, I think all of us need to kind of evolve from morality and social setting to more of a truth seeker or a spiritual setting. So, this human contradiction is always glaring in the face, but we want to awaken ourselves. We want to just question everything and not blindly follow certain rituals. Even right now, you see that a lot of practices that are being done, it's just culturally cool to do them, but no one knows the significance of it, why we are doing it. Maybe some might have picked up stereotypes from the culture, like this is how it is, it's stories and things like that. But those are just stories made by our perpetuators, made by our exploiters, who are still living through us, and we still give them leeway without even questioning the basics as to why is it that these practices and certain things exist. So I think in my previous video I just talked about how this whole culture of blowing up firecrackers is not mostly an Indian thing. It was mostly picked up from the Chinese, and then the Mughal Empire kind of cemented it in our cultural conscience. So I think a couple of things is, always don't mistake the social media fame or following. People worship it as success, but it's generally mass hypnosis. A lot of crony capitalists and businessmen kind of exist just so that they can capitalize on your weaknesses. This innate need of more and more, this innate need of following the cult of consumerism like a madman, thinking that just buy more and more, that equals happiness. But this is just slavery. You are trading away your freedom through these EMIs. One more thing which I find very absurd is this celebrity worship, that we just don't treat people as people, humans as humans. We treat them as these other entity coming from some other planet worshipping aliens or something of that sort. It just looks like modern slavery because you're not employing your individual thinking. Just admire people for their skills. Don't make anyone a god or anyone a devil. Humans are humans. And I think a lot of other things as well. The obsession with our body, the perfect look, the perfect hair, the perfect curves, this trend of moral policing on the internet world. When you see the real life actions of those people, those are in complete contradiction as to how they live their real life. So just adding a little bit depth and just not avoiding questions but asking them at each stage, that why is it that these things are kind of being done, because that is how you kind of become an individual thinker, more of a critical thinker. So there's one author, I think, which I would like to recommend you all. His name is Nassim Nicholas Taleb. So there are like a couple of books. One is Black Swans and the other is Anti Fragility. So I think these are like quite good books wherein you can kind of just understand systems and how basically this cult of collective thinking is questioned and how one can become more of an individual slash critical thinker. So question every normal before time forces you to. The wise don't wait for society to evolve, they just evolve themselves first. Every generation must burn its sacred illusions, because see what we are doing right now in the name of normality, it would be considered as stupidity by the future generations. So the real evolution is not from a moral standpoint that certain people will feel good, certain people will feel bad. It's just basing yourself on conscience, on the truth, on the facts, on living a life of compassion. So maybe just asking this question before doing anything, that what am I calling sacred today that my future self will laugh at tomorrow? Will my future self respect me for the choices that I'm doing right now? Because you see, morality, with all these examples, changes with time, and we all have this habit of just doing things because the group is doing them. But the truth is timeless, the facts are timeless. The question is, in whose corner are you standing? Is it the common morality, or is it the timeless truth which has been existing from eons on end? So I think, yeah, that's a perception which I just wanted to share. Some discussion, some thoughts which were there in my mind. Let me know what you feel about it. And until then, this is Debashish Pindra from Debu Ki Dastak signing off. Cheers.